Should I actually do this? Yeah, let's do this.
For you.
Hey, so I just saw Doctor Strange, and I think I'm done with Marvel movies now. But I came out of Doctor Strange just beat down, really. There's a moment in the film when I took my 3D glasses off and I put them on my lap and I said, I'm done. And I tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't. So I had to endure another 30 minutes of the movie, unfortunately. To really get into what I didn't like about this film, I think the best way to go about it is going through it bit by bit and explaining everything I didn't like about it. But first, let's get the positives out of the way. There are things I liked about this movie, believe it or not. They're not many, of course. There's a very few positives that I found with this movie, but they're there. So let's get those out of the way because it will take the least amount of time. For one, Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange did a great job. He actually kind of excelled in this role. He did a great American accent, and everyone around him did a pretty good job too. Mads Mikkelsen was great as the villain, even if the villain wasn't good at all. And Rachel McAdams did great as the kind of Deus Ex Machina character. Everyone in the movie did a really good job. And visually, this movie is pretty solid, I'd say. It's very visually appealing to look at. It's shot fairly well, and the direction is okay, I guess. But mainly, the visual effects are what's going to be talked about most about this movie, because they're good. They're pretty good, I would say. They're not incredible. They're not superior to maybe another Marvel movie. They seem fairly along the same lines as all the Marvel movies. There was crazy scenes with buildings folding in on each other for no reason that looked cool, but there was also quite a few scenes when green screens were pretty obvious, and that kind of took me out of the movie more than a couple of times. So that was frustrating, but overall the visuals were pretty solid. Performances were all great. Direction was okay. And I would say the first 20-30 minutes of this movie is actually pretty well done. To start off, you get introduced to who Doctor Strange is. His name is actually Stephen Strange. He's a neurosurgeon, the best in the world, presumably. And we get introduced to how good he is. We see him do a couple of operations, and in the middle of them, he's just like naming songs and guessing when their release date was, and performing this complicated surgery with really no sweat. So you can see how good he is. He gets in his Lamborghini and rolling down the road to a conference, and he gets in a car accident, crazy over-the-top car accident that kind of made me laugh because of how long it went on for. He hits a car and he spins off the road and he gets thrown off this cliff and he goes through a building and then he keeps tipping around and he hits a fence and goes through another building and then falls in the water. And I was like, wow, that was really no one would survive that. Wow. So his hands were constantly shaking afterwards. He did a lot of surgeries to get them repaired, but nothing worked, so they're really messed up and just shaking constantly. And so we see him go through all of this. We see him go through a couple more surgeries to try and fix his hands. So finally he gets desperate and goes to Eastern medicine. And this is when the magic aspect of this film is introduced. And it was at this point when we start getting introduced to multiverse and spell casting and all this complex magics. And the movie doesn't do a very good job of explaining really any of it. It starts talking about different kind of realities and all this stuff, multiverses, and you can do this and magic, and you can heal your body, and it'll be real good. And so there's a lot of exposition dumps in this kind of training montage. There's a lot of times when characters just sit down and say, blah, 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 and Doctor Strange is like, and then it moves on to the next scene, and then there's blah, 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 and So there's a lot of exposition that just kind of is thrown in this training montage bit. And I wouldn't say that this training bit is terrible. It's very serviceable. It's mediocre at best, I would say. This is when the film really starts to show that it is generic. It is very, very similar to almost every single superhero origin story you've ever seen. So it was at this point when I was like, oh no, not again, not another Ant-Man, oh no.
Wasn't my idea.
And if it was just this story, I think I would have been okay with the movie. It wouldn't have been above average, it probably wouldn't have been good, or yeah, again, above average, but it would have been a mediocre movie, and I would have been okay with that. But it doesn't do that. At first it does, and it's very mediocre, so I was like, oh, okay, it's just another Marvel movie, whatever. It'll be kind of fun, and I'll never watch it again. All right, I'm okay with that. And then the movie started going along, and every scene seemed to get worse, and worse, and worse, and worse, until the movie ended, and I was just broken. When it starts to get really bad is after the training montage, of course. It's almost the same way with every superhero origin story. The origin is really good and compelling and fun, and then as soon as the origin's done, the movie drops like a rock. And this one is exactly like that, except worse. At this point, we get introduced to Sanctums, which are these 3 areas of magics that, I guess, keep the world safe from intergalactic baddies or something. And the bad guy, Mads Mikkelsen, I can't even remember his freaking name. His name was stupid and long, and I didn't understand his motive at all. We get introduced to the Sanctums, and the big bad guy, Mads Mikkelsen, is breaking them to try and get one of the big baddies to come and destroy the world or something. And Doctor Strange, Benedict Cumberbatch, goes to one of the Sanctums, like one of them blows up and he gets blown into another one, the New York one, I think. And Mads Mikkelsen comes to that one with his servants, and they start fighting, and the master, the sorcerer master guy of the Sanctum, gets killed without a fight. Like the master of sorcery, like stands there, and Mads Mikkelsen walks up and just stabs him and kills him. And I was like, oh, that was fun. Master of sorcery just got freaking wasted. Master of Sorcery dies, Doctor Strange is there, and he's like, I'm gonna fight him, and he fights him, and he beats them all up, and I think handicaps Mads Mikkelsen? And he like kicks people out windows and into different places of the world, and he beats them all, and I was like, oh no, what? He's like still a trainee. He couldn't even teleport right, like 5 minutes ago, what? And he beat all these guys without even a problem. And this is when we get introduced to my least favorite part of this movie. And that would be this cape. Doctor Strange's cape. And this is going to sound weird, because it's weird. But the cape is basically just a Deus Ex Machina. And if you don't know what that is, that's basically just something that saves characters at the last second. And that is all this cape is in the movie for. I mean, and to look cool, I guess. But he's fighting Mads Mikkelsen in the sanctuary, and he breaks through the glass that has the cape, and then Mads Mikkelsen tries to stab him, the cape keeps blocking him, and everyone in the theater is laughing like, haha, it's so funny, he's blocking him. And I was like, without the cape he'd be dead. Mads Mikkelsen would have won 10 minutes ago without the cape, and the cape keeps pulling him around. He like shows him where like a gizmo to handicap Mads Mikkelsen is. It is a Deus Ex Machina, and that was very frustrating. And that was the most frustrating aspect of this movie, was all the times when our main characters get saved at the last second. Like, that makes the movie so much longer because you can't get into the movie. You can't feel the stakes because there are none. If you have a cape that saves you at the last second every time, what is good about it? What is good about the action scene if you know the cape's just going to save him? There's nothing fun about that. Makes the action scenes flat, like a flat line. It's boring. They're not fun. And suddenly the movie just kind of becomes dull and bland and lifeless because you don't care. I mean, you didn't care about the characters anyway. I didn't care about the characters. No one was introduced well. Rachel McAdams is basically just a plot device. She's another Deus Ex Machina. The only time she's ever in the movie is to save people from dying. If she wasn't in the movie, people would have died for once in a Marvel movie. But nope, she's there to save people that are gonna die. And that's her whole character, just save people that are dying. And then the villain has basically no motive, like he wanted to destroy the world so that he could live forever or something. I don't know, it doesn't make sense. He had no motive, he wasn't compelling, he was very boring, villain of the week, just like every other Marvel movie ever, just poor villains all around. So when you don't care about anybody, you don't care about the good guys or the bad guys, the action isn't fun. And then you introduce Deus Ex Machinas that save your characters from death every time. It's even less fun. It's not enjoyable. There's no stakes, so you can't get involved in what's happening. So instead of doing that, instead of giving stakes to the movie or taking risks, they just put an absurd amount of visual effects onto the screen. And I do mean an absurd amount. There's one scene, like I think I mentioned this earlier, when they go into the mirror dimension and buildings are falling in on each other and stuff's going everywhere, and it's right after the Sanctums scene. And I was like, who cares? They're not gonna die. Who cares? They're in a mirror dimension where nothing is affected. The real world isn't effective. So who cares? I don't care about the characters. I don't care about anything at this point. So I was just boring and an eyesore to look at because the entire scene in this mirror dimension fighting the bad guys and the good guys is all visual effects. That's it. That's all there is. It's visual effects and occasionally an actor's on the screen. But that's it. It's all visual effects and it's so excessive that it made me physically nauseous. And I don't get motion sick at all. I don't get sick in movies. I don't get any kind of way, but this movie made me sick because of how just crap is on the screen, how much stuff is just thrown into the movie, and it's this scene especially that just made me sick because there's a couple actors and then it's just green screens and they just have stuff moving everywhere and things going around our characters and our characters are throwing stuff and jumping off things, and I had to cover my eyes because I was getting a headache. This movie, I can't remember what happens in chronological order in this movie because it's a mess after the first 30 minutes. It's just visual effects, colors, explosions, running and jumping and flying and capes, and it's a joke. There's a fight scene. I'm not even sure when this fight scene takes place. I think it's before or after the mirror dimension. I don't even remember. But Rachel McAdams is saving Cumberbatch because he's dying. Yeah, if she wasn't there, he'd be dead. Again, Mads Mikkelsen would have killed him 30 minutes ago. But he gets saved by Rachel McAdams. And his spirit comes out of his body, and then another guy's spirit comes out of his body, and their ghosts are like fighting or something. And I was like, what? What? How does this make sense? And it doesn't, it's the dumbest fight scene I think I have ever seen in a big budget movie. I'm serious. I couldn't tell what was happening. There's like they were like throwing each other through walls, but hitting walls and bouncing off stuff and punching each other. And I was like, these are ghosts. These are ghosts of actual people that are fighting each other. What? And then the way the scene ends is Rachel McAdams defibrillates Cumberbatch to bring him back to life, and he like explodes with this energy, and one of the other ghosts is like, ow, that hurt for some reason. And he was like, oh, hey, do that again, but up the voltage. So she does, and does it again, and it explodes the other ghost. What? And there's like a master already there, the librarian in the movie who was just comic relief. That's all his role was just to be comic relief. And he's there protecting the Hong Kong Sanctum with like 10 other guys. And Mads Mikkelsen and 2 of his followers come up and they go to fight, and it cuts to Cumberbatch and Chiwetel like, we need to go there. And they go, and like the city's all blown up, and everyone is dead, and people are just lying dead on the ground, and the Sanctum is exploding, and the dark force realm place is coming into the world to do with something. I don't know what. And they get there, and Mads Mikkelsen's like, I'm gonna kill you. And then Benedict Cumberbatch like reverses time or something. And so everyone just starts like reversing, and the buildings start coming back together. And Mads Mikkelsen and everyone's like running backwards, and Benedict Cumberbatch and Chiwetel Ejiofor are watching like, whoa, we can change time and keep it from happening. And then Mads Mikkelsen breaks out of it or something so he can fight them in real time while the time is rewinding. I'm really trying to think of how this logically makes sense. And I don't want to hurt my brain too much, so I'm probably going to stop thinking about it. And he started rewinding time, and people came back to life, and the people that were the sorcerers that were defending the Sanctum came back to life and started helping them fight. And then the dark place started going away, and I was like, oh no, another Deus Ex Machina for us, yay. And they have a fight scene while the time's reversing, and it's visual effects galore. You can't tell what's happening half the time. It's just stuff flying everywhere, things rebuilding, people coming back to life that had already died, and them fighting and all this stuff. And that's when I gave up. Like, this shouldn't be a thing. You shouldn't put this kind of stuff in your movie. You can't reverse time like this. Why? Because now, how can you get involved? How can I reasonably think that the movie, how can I reasonably get involved or engaged in a movie where I now know that people can and will not die? The last scene in the movie just says, hey audience, screw you guys. You know, we do what we want now. Who cares about you? We don't care. We're not going to take risks. Screw that. You guys can, we're going to take your money. You guys can go home. We don't care. Any kind of stakes is like grabbed and forcibly tossed out the nearest window. Like, there's nothing to get involved in this movie with. There's no reason to get invested in anything that's happening. And to make things worse, this isn't the end. The end is when Cumberbatch jumps into the dark realm after he saves all his friends, and they just kind of like fight Mads Mikkelsen or something. Like, time freezes before Mads Mikkelsen blows up the Sanctum. I don't know. I can't even really remember what was going on in this scene because it's a mess. It's a joke. And he goes into the dark realm. I remember this vividly because he goes into this timeless, empty zone where this big bad guy that has like a pulsating disco face lives. And he decides that the best way to beat him is to create a time loop, is what it's called in this movie. And he goes to this big bad guy, and the big bad guy kills him, and he keeps respawning over and over and over again. And the bad guy keeps killing him, and he's like, oh, let me go. I don't want to keep killing you endlessly. What can I do to get out of this loop? And Cumberbatch is like, just go away and take Mads Mikkelsen with you. And he's like, okay. And the movie ends. Like, if there wasn't enough ex machinas in this movie, there's another one where I guess Cumberbatch can go into this empty zone and then respawn infinitely if he has a time bracelet. So that is why Doctor Strange for me is the weakest Marvel movie and the sole perpetrator of why I will not be seeing anymore. It is boring, it is bland, it is generic, it is poorly written, dialogue is bad, the characters are bad, makes zero sense, there's no stakes, there's nothing to get involved with, villain's terrible, and it sets up a universe that I don't want to see or be a part of because I don't care anymore. So, in the end, I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 10. If you like Marvel, you might enjoy it. It does have some fun stuff. It is fairly well-paced. Benedict Cumberbatch is good in the movie. And visually, it is pretty striking to look at times. So if you enjoy Marvel or if you enjoy action movies, you'll probably get a kick out of this one. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like, whatever you want to do. Just go for it.